elevation mindset session on moving from anger to motivation. So we want to start off by asking you a couple of questions as we tend to start off these conversations. What are you angry about right now? What really is coming up for you that you are upset about, frustrated, rageful, outraged about? What are you tolerating right now? We're going to be talking a little bit about each of those various forms of anger today and how we can leverage that into motivation.
And guys, as we're talking, feel free to use the chat. We are really here. We are really interested. And we want to know what's on your heart right now. What are you angry about? And what, when you sit back, pisses you off? What's getting to you right now? We have such crazy things going on globally. Yes, absolutely.
Yep. I feel that too. Anyone else? Got a couple of thoughts in here. Wanted to kind of.
What about you, Michael? What are you angry about right now? What's up your keister?
So right now, I think that in some ways I'm angry that I had so much stuff planned when I also am on vacation this week. So I have this event. I'm helping somebody paint their house. I actually had a couple of meetings this week, but technically it's a vacation week, and it's like I could have planned this so much better. So it's one reason why I'm in a new location. There's a lake right there. I can see it out the window on the other side of the monitor, and I want to be out in the water, but at the same time, I want to show up for this as well. So it's that, how did I use this schedule for myself to actually be distracted?
Well, I pray that we're not the distraction. I pray we're the focus. And, you know, yeah, a lot of us overschedule. We have a hard time saying no, right? Oh my gosh.
The boundaries.
Boundaries, right? And look at what people wrote up here. Hard to put up boundaries, Cliff said. Making the wrong choices, which is probably something with boundaries. Michael saying boundary issues as well with his time and schedule. So there's some recurring themes happening here. And you know, I am, let's see, what am I currently upset about? I'm angry. Family issues. Oh yeah, we all have family issues, right? You know, I have a family member who, God bless them, they say they're going to do something and they never do it. And it sets expectations and disappointments and drama, right? If your family can't make you angry, then who can, right? Family issues are always incendiary. So, Michael, you also asked another question. You asked, what are you tolerating? Guys, that's a different spectrum. There's anger, and then there's tolerating. What are you tolerating in your life?
I'm tolerating not being made a priority in certain circles and certain relationships.
Oh, Carla, I have felt that sting before, and I took it and I took it and I took it until I was done. I was done. And we're going to talk about that too. That's definitely something. Other people, what are you tolerating right now? What are you putting up with? What are you dealing with? Look at all the language we have in our vocabulary about tolerating. And yet we're also, we get preached at that tolerating is good. We need to be more tolerant.
Go ahead, Yvonne.
I'm also on vacation. and, and I left yesterday. And what I tolerated was taking the entire mental load of planning and doing the whole friggin' vacation. And then you get here and you're like, I'm so happy you were my first thing to do today. Because I'm out in the mountains on a walk, just breathing. But that's the thing is, it's like, okay, I have a fully capable teenager, a fully capable partner. Why do I have to say, please water the plants before we go? Please water the garden before we go. Have you packed towels? Oh, well, I thought you'd pack them for the family. Like, you guys are almost adults. Well, one is, but I think we do this all the time. And then when we're on vacation, we're doing the unpacking, we're doing all the thinking, all the organizing. And I'm sure there's men out there that help and kids out there that help. But why do I have to ask every step of the way for the basic things? And my daughter redeemed herself because she drove the entire 5 hours yesterday. So I was so thankful I didn't have to at least do the driving. But she's only had her license for 2 weeks, so she was more than happy to do that. And we're very proud of her because it was through the mountains, through major construction. She didn't bat an eye, and I'm like, oh, thank goodness this kid can actually drive well. And that was a huge relief. But that's the thing is, if it's in it for them, they volunteer. But but the basics, and I think everyone encounters it on vacation, where we take 3 days to unwind. And then we spend the next day leaving to pack everything up. And then we're like, did we really have a vacation? So anyways, that's where I'm up. I don't know if you can see the mountains. No, there's some. They're big.
Yeah, we can
It's
see
the
a little
Rockies.
bit. Where are you at, Yvonne? Where are you at?
Right now I'm in British Columbia in Revelstoke. At the
Okay.
base of a mountain, because my other daughter
Fantastic.
lives at the base of the mountain, so it's perfect. And there's no smoke today, so I'm happy because it's about 2 hours from all the fires. So I'm just happy we got here because we didn't know if we could a couple days ago.
Well, thank you for spending your time with us. We love it. So guys,
So that's my
when you thank you. Thank you. So when you think about what you're angry about and what you're tolerating, are these things you can control? How many things are you angry about that are out of your control? And I will challenge you, is anything actually out of your control? This is a real question that we have to ask ourselves. What am I upset about? What is my attention going to that's triggering? And is this something I can do something about? Michael, what are your thoughts on that?
Well, for me, it's a lot about ownership in our lives, for sure. So this idea of we have control over the circumstances that we're in, about the place we're at, is certainly a key point for me. And I keep coming back to a conversation we had with Devin Bailey several months ago, where he was talking about the two lists. The list on the thing that I can control, and the list that is what the universe can handle, what God can handle, what the force can handle. And every single time he pulls something off of this list and put it on his own list, is when he gets upset, frustrated, and angry. It's a matter of leaving the things on the universe's list and then tackling the things that we do have control over. But this idea of extreme ownership is also that I contributed to the circumstances that got me here.
Yes.
The people that are in my life here and how they're treating me is actually up to me on how I set and hold my boundaries that we talked about a little bit earlier. There is definitely this opportunity for us to stand up for ourselves and say, I won't be treated like that. Or if you treat me like that, I'm not going to be here anymore. And that, especially if those are, as Suzanne talked about earlier, family members, it's hard to say that to someone who you have a deeper, stronger bond with otherwise. I deal with that in my family. My daughter's uncle is someone that is even hard to tolerate many times. But he's a part of her life, and she's learned how to navigate it, but she tolerates it. And he can push that boundary a lot, to the point that she gets frustrated, upset, angry, outraged at what he's doing. But she's also not holding that boundary of, you will not treat me that way. What you're doing for your work, similarly, what skills can you learn in order to expand what you're providing for compensation in the world? You have the opportunity to learn, especially in this day and age, like John talks about. You have all the information you need in this device in your pocket. It's a matter of where you spend your time.
Ramona, I think you had a question. Maybe.
Looks like we got put down by Ramona. Did you have something for us, Ramona?
Hold on, you guys be patient with me. I don't usually use my phone.
Okay.
Yeah, I love this conversation that you're having, because I understand what you're saying, Michael, about when you put things on a list to take care of yourself, you get the gentleman you were referring to gets angry. But until we become mindful of it, we really don't have any control over it. So I look at it as a blessing, to be able to see what doesn't work for me anymore is an opportunity to embrace it with love, and to look at it like, okay, now that I know this, what can I do about it? And how can we do it without pissing other people off? Excuse the expression, but basically that's the truth. It's like, how do you do it without upsetting people who matter to you? People who have contributed value to your life and who love you. How do you do that? And I know a lot of women, I have an accountability group and with women, and this is one of our struggles. It's like, we see what we want, we see our vision, we see our life purpose, we see who we want to become, but it's a struggle getting there, because how do you do it? You first of all, you can't do it alone. And who wants to be alone anyway, really? And you want to be with people who you love and care about. So how do you do it in a way that, I don't know how to say this. This is the first time I'm talking about this, so please forgive me. But it's about, I think, first of all, you have to be honest with yourself and with others about what's going on with you, and maybe even share your vision with them. If they really matter to you and they're part of your life, share that vision with them and see if they're on board with you, and if they're willing to remind you when it's time to make a decision, to ask the right questions, like, do you really want to do this? Are you doing this for me, or are you doing this for you? And there are people out there who will align with you. We just have to get over the fear of being rejected by them.
Right. And Ramona, you're going towards what we're supposed to do with our anger, what we're supposed to do and ways to deal with it. And I love that you said that. Right now, though, when you look at what's upsetting you, what's angry, what's in your control, and what's not, just the act of doing that is taking a step back from the emotion you're feeling. And again, this is about anger. Just by asking yourself, wait a second, is this in my control or not? You are starting to engage in one of the first tools that Michael and I definitely wanted to talk to you about today. So Michael, you want to take us forward?
I do. Now that we kind of touched a little bit on those things that we have control, and in many ways we do have a fair amount of control of ourselves in a situation. Can we control what other people do, though? And that's part of this as well. And one of the things we also kind of want to ask as a question for you as a community is, how much energy does anger take from you when you get to that space. There are many emotions that are really taxing on us. You feel sapped afterwards. You feel depleted afterwards. And especially being in this intentional community that we are in, is that an emotion you want to feel? Is it worth the energy to get upset about that thing that, yes, we've actually looked at, this is what's making me upset. We've taken that step back, but is it worth putting energy into? Because it's going to take it. And we really kind of wanted to at least kind of set the stage for, at least in this conversation, about, what is it costing us to get angry, especially in political situations, in family situations, in social relationship situations? Is the anger worth it? Is it, and what about that are we allowing ourselves to get sucked into? Because
Yeah.
And there's lots of different areas, and there's one other aspect of this that I wanted to touch on too, is it's really easy to see anger on someone else. You can tell when they're really upset by their facial expression, by their energy, all that sort of stuff. But some of these other emotions that are underneath it are really hard to discern. You can tell when somebody's upset, when they're really sad, when they're really happy. But what about all those other emotions that have led to the anger, or that are the foundation for that anger? Is it regret or shame or guilt or disappointment, or so many other flavors that actually lead into that? And being on a men's team for like 3 years, one of the things we talked about was, for men, we're allowed to actually feel fear and anger are really the things that men kind of go to, but there's almost always layers underneath that. And we're going to be talking about kind of, what are the tools that you need in order to process that. But I wanted to kind of our toe in that too, is there's almost always some other emotion underneath the anger. But if we just deal with the anger and we don't deal with the other things, it just festers and grows.
Definitely. Michael, you hit on something that I think is important for us. And you said it in the context of men, how men have a limited range of acceptable emotions. And society often frowns on men, exhibiting the full range of spectrum of emotions. I would also suggest that, I'm a little bit unlike most people in that I don't think the full range of our emotions is a bad thing at all. In fact, I am like, I'm at a point in life where when I'm super angry, I'm a bit surprised because it doesn't happen very often. And I'm like, oh my God, I'm angry. I'm really angry. And it doesn't happen that often. So, however, I think the full range is important. And I think that it's up to us to learn what these emotions indicate. And that's one of the most important tools that Michael and I want to help you guys master, is to understand that, and in the communities we're in, guys, you've heard this before, that our emotions are our GPS. We have this emotional guidance system that's helping us understand, what is going well in life, what is not going well in life, when to run, when to stay, when to invest. And anger is just another signaling emotion. So what do you think it's signaling? And when you guys wrote your list in the chat of the things that you were angry about, these are the things it's signaling, because you said boundaries. Oh, I shouldn't have done this. Or, oh, this isn't happening, even though I'm putting in all this effort. Something is being frustrated, something is being blocked, there's a boundary that's being what? Breached. So when we have anger, number one, I wouldn't, some of us come from cultures as well where anger is not socially acceptable. And rage, certainly not. But I think it's really important for us to honor where we're feeling, what we're feeling. And, if you've been with Michael and I more than once, observe it, understand it, don't stay. Don't stay. The title of this is From Anger to what? Motivation. We can't stay, guys. It's expensive. And Michael and I were talking about this, and this is a point that I make up with several emotions. As somebody who, I have health issues, severe immune system issues, rare, potentially fatal blood disease, blah, blah, blah. I have evaluated carefully the physical cost of extreme emotions. It's no secret, like sadness, grief, they rob your immune system. Anger is very expensive emotionally. And if it's costing you something physically, what else is it costing you? Something spiritually? Connection with your goals? Connection with your loved ones? So, it's not to demonize the emotion. It's just to understand what it does to us and understand what Michael was saying. Anger is a threshold that's reached after all of these other things have been triggered. So what are those other things that led up to it? Even though it can happen suddenly, it can happen suddenly. We all know. I'm a redhead. I know that. We get angry. So, but there are all these other things that happen that led up to this anger. And where were we when that initial boundary was breached? Did we have our eye on our boundaries? Do we have our eye on our goals? Or are we so sidetracked with anger that we're now forgetting about our goals, forgetting about our true north, our highest vibration, and allow ourselves to get distracted with disappointment, resentment, grief, fear, all of those emotions that could lead to anger if unchecked. Does that make sense?
Ramona, did you have something for us?
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. I'm going to have to leave real soon because I'm losing the charge of my phone, and I committed to helping some friends with their sailboat today. But I just wanted to say to you that I understand where you're coming from, and this is a great conversation for everybody here and in the world, actually. But what I'm discovering is that it's more likely for men to express anger, especially on the spot, like immediately, than it is for women, based on my personal experiences and what I've heard other women say. So I have to leave the conversation because I'm losing my battery, and I've committed to some friends to help them with some things on the boat. But I'd like for you to have, involve some of the women in the conversation about what happens to them when they become anger. And I know that sometimes the anger is not first and foremost experience. The first and foremost experience is generally like guilt or shame. Oh, I did something wrong. What's wrong with me? Why did I screw up? How could I have done this? When somebody else expresses anger around me, typically it's always my fault. And it might not be my fault. And not only that, but when someone expresses anger toward me inappropriately, how long does it take for me to get the courage to stand up to them and say, I don't appreciate what you did. And it was so inappropriate for you to do that at that time. If you have an issue with me, let's discuss it privately. These kinds of things need to be addressed. And again, I appreciate you guys bringing this conversation up, because it's really, it's detrimental to our health.
Absolutely.
Because we oftentimes turn anger into ourselves and blame ourselves for things
Yes,
that we aren't really responsible for.
that's right. You're so right, Ramona. Thank you so much for that. And we are so grateful that you came and shared a little time with us before you meet your friends.
Yeah, well, I'm already here on the boat, but and I got to get to work with them, and like I said, I'm losing my. But
Yeah.
even so, let me just say one more thing. These are my dearest friends here in St. Petersburg, Florida, and they've helped to save my life basically 5.5 years ago when I moved here, and they've asked me to do things, and oftentimes they'll say, "What are you doing this day at this time?" And I'll say, "Well, I've got this plan or that plan," and then I say, "No, I'm okay. I can help you," but they're
Yeah.
always saying, "Look, we want you to take care of the things you need to take care of." So that if that doesn't work for you, then
Boundaries.
yeah, if that doesn't work, they're
Boundaries,
actually,
baby.
yeah, they're actually supporting me and doing the things I want to do. And even today, they're like, "Well, can you come help us on the boat? What do you have planned?" I said, "Well, I have a couple of webinars I want to attend." "Well, you go ahead and do that." And I'm like, "No, no, 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 no. If it's a choice between the webinars or church on Sunday morning, I'd rather go to church, because you can't do church again, but I can always see the recordings." So, that's kind of what happens. And I'm only now becoming aware of how oftentimes I choose them over me. But, but it's not a bad thing. It's just I'm at the point of awareness and really beginning to take a look at what the cost is, if there is a cost.
There's always
so
a
these are-
cost.
There's
There's
always
always
a
a
cost.
cost.
Yeah.
Well, sometimes the cost can be, beneficial, so
Yes. Or something you're willing to pay, and that's okay.
or yeah, and see, that's great. So I gotta go. I'm losing my battery, and I've got to
Okay,
Thank you.
love. Good to
But
see
love you
you.
guys. Love you
Bye-bye.
guys. Thanks for providing quality, conversations here on the
Conversations.
platform. Yeah, it
Okay,
works.
take care, Ramona. Bye now.
You're welcome.
Thank
Bye-bye.
you.
Bye-bye.
Carla, did you have something for us?
Yeah, I think we did touch on some really good points, because I can only speak for the American culture, because that's how I've had to learn to grow into this culture. My family's first gen from a different country. But in this culture, what I've noticed is that we're taught that we have to suppress our anger, and men are taught that they have to suppress their sadness. And that's so damaging, because now we're finally, and we're in such an amazing time that we live in now. We're finally understanding that it doesn't matter what you look like on the outside, what on the inside is. We're all human. We all have that range of emotions, and it's okay. Like, women should get angry, because that you can't tell somebody don't do this if innately that's how we were created, to have all of those emotions inside of us.
Yeah.
And beyond that, I think I still struggle with being able to express anger, because again, when you express anger, that's that something within me was breached, a boundary was breached, whether it's conscious or subconscious, because men can express anger more acceptably, so to speak. They externalize it. Women tend to internalize it, and that's the sadness. So I internalize so much of it, and being able to express that and say that. That being said, one of the struggles that I have with in this conversation, we can intellectualize it, and we're talking about it, and we can recognize it, but because it's such a visceral reaction, and because it's just the limbic, most basic fight or flight, keep me safe brain that is engages when we're in those moments, like, you can't intellectualize it at those moments. You're just like, something needs to come out. There is something here that needs to express itself somehow, some way.
Carla, I say enjoy it. Enjoy it. You have a full range of the human experience, enjoy it. Don't stay there. Enjoy it. Appreciate it. Like, wow, this is some powerful feelings I'm having. Like, wow, whatever. But, we're not saying hurt someone. We're not saying misdirected. And you're right, in that moment, especially if it's a flash thing and you were not self-aware enough to catch the tiny triggers along the way that led up to it. And they're always there. Even if it happens very quickly, there are those trigger points that happens before that point of anger that exist. And it's up to us to develop the neural network that's fast enough to say, this is what this is. So, Michael and I, when we were talking about this, I said, in my most angry moment, I have never said a word I regret to someone. Like, it's just not, I don't think mean thoughts about people. I will tell them, like a third person, F off, something like that. But again, I never forget in that moment that, that's a human being. That's a human being. So it's up to us to have that control, I think, but it's difficult, but I think it's very possible. And I think the sharper we are is when we can catch those boundaries that are triggered along the way. There's a breach, there's a breach, there's a breach, there's a series of breaches. Usually rage is a result of a series of breaches left unchecked until we say, we have those terms, they blew their top, we even say, or I'm sure there's a ton of other expressions.
Yeah, Yvonne just mentioned losing your marbles. It was another one of those, kind of that experience. So, Cliff, did you have something to share with us?
Yeah, I had, but while listening, I think it just flew away.
So sorry.
No, it's okay. I think I can touch base a little bit on what I wanted to say was that I work with a lot of people, and what I discovered around the times, because I always said to people, if there is anger, just try to express it, because you're suppressing it for such a long time, and that's eventually costing your health and your health, because you're having pain all over your body. And having this expression of anger and frustration, it helped a lot of people. But then it came back and it was exactly what you were saying, Suzanne, like Michael also, is that anger hurts. Like too much anger is also not good for your body, because it's how did you say it? What does it cost you? Yes. Anger is a lot of energy that's costing you. But what I recognize is that when people go into that realm of just accepting that they're angry, it's like climbing a mountain. Like go as hard as you can, just feel and accept it, but then they always fall down into sadness. It's always at the end of the most high anger, there's always the deepest valley going down into sadness, and people just crash. And mostly you see that people that really are like in rage, after that they just fall on their knees and they start crying. And but what I'm just thinking is, because your topic is about from anger to motivation, so I'm very curious to know how you guys are looking at this. Like how can you transform it, that you can keep the energy without losing yourself into the emotion, that it's like beneficial instead of like that it's costing you, but at the same time that you're also being able to express yourself. Because it's one of my things that I don't know if it's right, but I feel like it's necessary to express oneself honestly through the core of your being, because if you don't do it, then you're suppressing yourself again. Like a child is a more pure form of energy, because something comes in, 7 seconds later it just goes out. I'm a little bit trapped between those two analogies. Like should we be like kids, like it comes in and goes out, like just be pure, or should we use it like what Carla was saying, like should we do it more rationally? It comes in and then observe it, accept, like what you guys are saying, accept it, but then don't stay there. But if you don't stay there and let it be, then you're also just not expressing it. So I feel like there are like two things hanging in. And
do you think there's anything inherently wrong about how children process emotion?
No, because I feel like children just go do it on the spot. Like they feel it and it goes.
And they don't hold on to it, but they do express it.
Yeah, absolutely.
but they
Yeah.
don't hold the grudge. And it's like, oh, okay.
Yeah.
So, and I think that's because they don't have the repeated trauma yet. And the repeated trauma, the memories of the hurt, the repeated hurt, I think causes that difference in it. But what you were saying about when somebody kind of becomes emotionally exhausted after their anger or rage, and the result is sadness, that's because they've come to realize those boundaries that have been breached, right? And that's what happens is behind all anger is hurt of some sort. And it's important for us to, like, you know, that's why we want you to deal with it before it gets there. But if it does get there, Michael, let's talk about what to do with it. First of all, Michael, has there been a time when you have ever been so angry and you didn't channel it well?
Yes, yes, there's definitely been some key times that has happened for sure. The one that actually comes to mind was, it was a sadness, was a disappointment to the extreme. And I would say that in the moment, I don't think it was all that healthy, but after the fact, there certainly was a positive result. So I was on a team with someone, and they've just outright quit out from underneath me in a point where we were already kind of upset. And I channeled that energy into tearing the trees out of my yard from the ground with my bare hands. That's how angry I was about this. And I mean, we're talking, you know, this size trees, not, you know, big trees like that. It's something I wanted to do anyways. And it's like, okay, I need to put this energy to something, because if I don't put it into something like that, then myself and someone else is going to get hurt, because I was already hurt and I didn't want to channel that into somebody else. So yes, it was that was probably one of the most angry that I've been in the last probably 10 years or so. And it had culminated. I wasn't watching all those signs, and it culminated to this point where it was this flashpoint at the top.
Mm-hmm.
And I was sore for a week after that. I had scrapes and bruises all over from doing this. So there ended up being some harm to me on that. But I was also able to get that energy out. So, you know, Cliff, when you said is, how do you balance those two things? And sometimes it is finding something you can put that energy into, and hopefully not to the point where you're injuring yourself.
Or killing trees.
Well, the trees needed to go, turning into a parking lot, but you know, it did so much better with a chainsaw instead of, you know, tearing them out of the ground. But for me, I've actually done an anger management course, because I was at a point in a relationship where that what you're talking about, where it just builds up and builds up over time, that all that resentment and I think in this particular case of resentment, that was the armor that I was wearing, was that I was frustrated and angry all the time. One of the biggest points that they had talked about is that anger management isn't about really managing the anger. It is a matter of putting a gap between when you feel the emotion and you take an action on it. And Suzanne said that she doesn't say hurtful things at other people when she's angry, which is awesome. But many times that does come out when we're upset. But is it that idea of the thoughts that you had when you were not angry that are finally spilling out because you weren't willing to express them before? Are they now spilling over, like Yvonne mentioned before, which just blows off the top, and you've been keeping this list for a month, a year, a decade, and finally it's actually spilling over onto someone? And sometimes it's not even about that person. It's who that person reminds you of from your childhood, from, you know, your last long relationship. So I think that us learning to understand, like, giving that gap, and even if it's 2 or 3 seconds from whenever that emotion comes up to taking an action on it, is one of the best tools that we can bring to this, is that awareness of, wow, I just got angry. What is that about? Why is this coming up in this particular moment? And I get the opportunity to express that. In fact, it's part of my vision statement for my emotional category is I honor my emotions, tempered by wisdom, and express them to maintain my boundaries, my standards, and my terms.
Guys, that's everything we've been talking about: boundaries, standards, and terms. Like this is the root of when we get angry. Like these thresholds have been crossed, or we've let our standards down. We're probably actually upset at ourselves, disappointed in ourselves to some degree, maybe not taking ownership of it yet. Thank you, Michael.
Sure. And then, when we start, you kind of asked Cliff about, what do we do with it next?
Yes.
Well, now that we've actually discovered what triggered us, it is a matter of then unpacking that triggers. What do we own about the cause of that? What is our responsibility in that too? And knowing what the boundary was that was violated helps, but how did we contribute to it? What did we actually allow to happen? What did we actually, yeah, exactly. Triggers our unmet needs. Yeah, exactly. What is it? And did we not, was there an expectation there that was in here, but wasn't out there? That also, at least for me, is that many times that I've got in my head an expectation of how I think someone should act or what someone should do. But if I haven't asked for it, how can I expect it? It ends up being, is it their responsibility to read my mind? So is that one area that I can own that I didn't ask for this from that particular person, from the universe, from myself? Did I not state it? And it's one reason why I love this framework that so many of us are working in, is that we are asking the universe for what we want in our lives. We are saying, this is how I want to be treated. We're saying, this is how I want to show up. Carla, did you have something around that?
I do. It's more of a question because we intellectualize, but our emotional self is, how do we manage that self-responsibility versus self-blame? And where does that boundary lie between saying, because I've been the recipient of too many people's anger without even having any understanding of what did I do from a child. And I'm kind of finally accepting, okay, you know what, now I have that greater awareness, of myself and how I operate and how the universe operates. And but always being the scapegoated, how do I easily discern, well, what is my responsibility for my portion versus my, and without letting it delve into self-blame? Because there's a big difference. And one of the struggles that I have is, yes, I acknowledge there's a lot of things. What is our responsibility within this that caused it to build up to this point? But when do we also hold the other person accountable for their actions? How do we navigate that part is what I'm struggling with, and would like more understanding of that. If anybody has any insight.
Well, I think it's fascinating as a question, because I think it was it was actually earlier this year where we were actually going from blame to ownership was one of the other concepts that we talked about. And for me, blame is something we do out there. Ownership is what we take control of. At least that's kind of the part of the subject we talked about. And it's a matter of really, sometimes it's verbalizing this, is I will own this part in this. And then the rest of that's yours. I mean, you can blame me, but I don't need to take it. It's that gift that you don't receive. Is you can say, I'll own that I contributed this part, and actually saying that to the person who's trying to put their shit on you many ways, and you don't need to take it though. And sometimes it does come, at least for me, around some of this personal awareness that so many of us are already doing, is, okay, I can see how I can contribute to this, and I can own that. I can see I contributed this, and I own that. The rest, I'm not willing to own. I had this conversation actually almost exactly a year right now. So my stepson actually had a meltdown, if you'll talk about that. And he wanted me to own what other people would do in his meltdown. And I had to express to him, I can only own my actions, my responses, my reactions. I cannot say what anybody else is going to do. I'm not willing to take that on because I can't. I cannot actually own what Suzanne does because she's has her own free will. She can actually take her own actions. And I was willing to state that. And if it actually put a barrier between me and that other person in that moment, that's one of those boundaries I had to hold is, yes, I will own what I do. And ownership, like you said earlier, a huge part of what my life has actually helped me develop is I've done some shitty things in my life and I have to own that I did those things and the consequences for it. But I'm not willing to take on what somebody else is going to put on me because it's their stuff instead of mine. And I know it can be very difficult to say, no, I'm not taking that. But if somebody handed you something that you didn't want, would you actually pick it up and take it? And you get to choose whether you take it or not. And the same thing is true for a compliment, for blame, for excuses. You get to choose. And yes, it does intellectualize that, but here's my question for you is, when someone gives that to you and you get triggered, what is it that's getting triggered? What in you is actually feeling like you aren't valuable enough to not own that if it's not yours?
That's where I was going to go.
Pretty deep.
And you guys, if you've been with Michael and I more than once, you know that we frequently go back to your beliefs, your identity, your beliefs, and your identity. Really, all of our boundaries are a result of what we believe about ourselves, who we believe ourselves to be. And in those cases, Carla, we all have had to choose between being programmed by people who, for better or worse, programmed us, and sometimes gave us shitty programming. Programming that says, I'm not enough. Programming that says it's my fault no matter what. Programming that says no matter how much I do, it doesn't matter, I'll never be accepted. We've all had choices to accept this kind of programming or not. And it's up to us to choose. Just because you have a thought doesn't mean it's true. Just because you have a belief doesn't mean it's true. And the beauty is we can change our beliefs, we can change our thoughts, and it's up to us to say, I'm having a limiting belief. Throw it out. And it's easier said than done, but it is a process where we start catching like, oh, look at me. Look at my self-defeating behavior. Look at me. I didn't choose the right food again. I didn't go to the gym. Oh, look at this. I started fights, even though there's something deeper that was bothering me, and I'm letting it come out in this way. You know, there's all, at heart, when Michael's talking about ownership, it's not just over our actions, it's actually over our thoughts. It's actually over our identity too. Who do we believe ourselves to be? This will define our boundaries. If you believe you are whole, worthy, beautiful, loving, expressive, big, you're going to have different boundaries than somebody who believes they're never enough, that believes they're small, that believes if you don't take what's yours, somebody's going to take it from you.
And to piggyback on that too, I think that we're going to kind of come back to the tools is surrounding yourself with things that remind you of that, rather than watching TV shows, reading books, watching videos on YouTube, having people actually feed you information that diminishes you. You get to choose that as well. So if they've actually done studies that if you expose someone to violent images over and over, they become more violent. The same thing can be true for feeling empowered, is being amongst people who support you in your growth, in your empowerment. It's also, I think it was Ramona who's talking about is having people, being able to express what you want without pissing off other people. In my opinion, if I'm surrounded by the right people, no matter what I do won't piss them off because they care and love me enough to allow me to express that. It's one of the things why I kind of touched on the men's team earlier for me is that was a safe space for me to express anything and still be cared about, accepted, and loved. It was necessary for me to have that to get through what I was in at the time, where I could actually express the absolute deep depths of anger that I had and be supported instead of talked down to or diminished or told those were not valid feelings. And sometimes that was by physically pushing against something to actually be able to expend that energy to dig up that anger and find out the hurt underneath. Because I know for me personally that anger was on top of a whole bunch of resentment, guilt, shame, regret. And I needed to get that anger off the top before I could unpack the pieces underneath. But having a community that you can do that in is one of those other, for me, key points, key necessary things in our lives, is having that circle that accepts, cares, and loves about you, regardless of what you're expressing, regardless how you're failing, regardless of how you're succeeding as well.
Definitely, guys. I mean, you need to have friends that you can really express your full range with, that they, we have I think a plague of fragility where we block someone or censor someone or cut them out if they do something we don't like. They say something we don't agree with. Or, oh, heaven forbid, they express an emotion that's raw and intense.
And in those, it's an opportunity for the idea, and this is what Suzanne has touched on for a little bit. It's not it's not the idea that like a rage room where you actually spend all day in the rage room and destroy a bunch of stuff. It's having a space where you can express that, so then you can be more collected, more calm, and have actually brought up a lot of those things that are underlying that anger. So it doesn't get to rage. Because I know for me, rage is whenever things get broken, people get hurt. And how do we then shift that into motivation? Yes, it's finding the triggers, but there's a lot of energy behind that. There is a lot of focus, and it's an opportunity to, once we've taken that step back from it, of how do I want it to happen again in the future? If I were to actually, so there's one tool that we didn't actually have in our list, and I want to bring it up now because it makes sense to me, is the idea of when you're going to bed at the end at night, and you're kind of, because I know for me, my brain is going through and reviewing the rest of the day, is in that moment that you know that you went to that place of anger, replay it back in your head as you're getting ready to fall asleep about how you would have addressed it differently without the anger.
That's good.
How would you have actually acted in that space? What would you have actually changed? So then you're kind of reprogramming your brain for the next time you come up against that particular situation to be able to handle it differently. What would you have done to preface that so that it didn't get to that space? How are you going to have that conversation with that person or approach that concept differently the next time you come to it? So instead, it is actually coming from a more empowering place, because anger can be fuel, but it's volatile, it's dangerous, and can actually lead to harm.
You know, I think because of the nature of this conversation, because it's been so, you guys have been so engaging today, I don't want us to dilute the tools that we've been talking about. And so, Michael, I wanted for us to kind of run by them together, because we've been sprinkling them throughout and it may not seem like they're there.
So from my memory, we've covered is slow down and take inventory.
Yes.
So be aware what triggered you. We're also talking about, we talked about taking space. I think someone had mentioned that earlier, is sometimes you do need to step away from a situation to come at it from a different perspective. It is a matter of taking the inventory on a regular basis of what is it that you're tolerating each day, because those tolerations build up and become deeper resentments that then explode into anger. And own your part in it and let the rest go. Because those things that are out of your control, can you impact them? Can you affect them? But those things that are in your control, you need to own them 100%. And one of the last pieces is surround yourself with people and ideas and media that supports your empowerment, supports you in achieving your goals, rather than surrounding yourselves with those things that are going to always trigger you, that are always going to drive you to a place of frustration, irritation, upset. I found a wheel that I think that most of the emotions on the wheel were all about anger, hatred, and suffering. I'm like, oh, can we focus on, what did we learn from that? Because yes, that emotion is going to come up, and having the full experience of that emotion is really important, but we can't intellectualize it afterwards. Is what happened there. May not be able to intellectualize it in the moment, but luckily we still have several more breaths in our life to be able to unpack that, so we can actually determine how we want to address it in the future.
And I think there's one more that I frequently go to, because all of us in these we're all into deep personal development. We're all into, examining ourselves. I honestly think that there is sometimes a wisdom in the two brilliant words, so what? Sometimes, so what you're angry? Who cares? What in the world has changed? Sometimes you don't need to spend a day ruminating about it and analyzing it and journaling about it. Sometimes, so what? Sometimes you need to get over it and move on. And that's okay. That's okay. Sometimes we're a little bit too self-important. Or sometimes the person that we're dealing with, they have a lot going on, and it's a lot to unpack. So it's not our job, maybe. It's not our calling. That's okay. Sometimes, so what? Something happens. Move on with your life. You have goals. You're meant to be here. You have things to do. Get to it. You got this.
Thank you. Very helpful. And thank you for holding space.
Absolutely. We love having you.
Thank you. And nice meeting everyone.
Yes.
It's me and you, Carla. So with that, I think we are going to wrap up. We are past the top of the hour. Real appreciate having you, all of you here, where we're actually talked about from anger to motivation. Use that anger for fuel to change where you are in your life moving forward. And just to give you a heads up, next month we are talking about from loneliness to confidence. And we're looking forward to having that conversation with you where we kind of unpack the difference between being alone and being lonely, because they're two very different things.
Beautiful.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Bye now.
Have a beautiful week.
You too.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye-bye.